At exactly 3:17 a.m., I woke up to the sound of gravel crunching outside my warehouse. When I checked the security camera feed, I saw two men in black polos labeled HOA enforcement trying to force open my side door with a crowbar. One of them actually whispered, "Don't wake him. Just mark the violations and move on." Violations. On my land. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with thieves. I was dealing with something worse. Bureaucratic idiots on a power trip. Just a second, we're building something new on Karen Cam. And if you've ever laughed, raged, or rooted for the underdog in these stories, we'd be grateful if you hit subscribe over there too. I didn't know whether to laugh or load my shotgun. These two weren't police, weren't code enforcement, weren't anything resembling actual authority. Just a pair of overconfident goons with shiny badges that looked fresh off Etsy. I slipped on my boots and headed out the back door, silent and slow, just as the one with the clipboard muttered, "Looks like we'll have to flag this for non-compliant siting and improper drainage access." They hadn't even seen the full warehouse yet. They were just making stuff up. As I stepped around the corner of the building, I clicked on my flashlight and beamed it right in their faces. The one with the clipboard dropped his pen. The other jumped so hard he nearly fell into my cactus planter. "This is private property," I said calmly. "And you two are about 5 seconds away from meeting the sheriff if you don't tell me what the hell you're doing." The taller one, recovering his composure, puffed out his chest. "We're with the HOA Compliance Task Force. Routine inspection." Routine inspection. I pointed down the driveway. "This isn't even in your HOA. The line ends 4 houses that way." "Doesn't matter," the shorter guy said, still trying to look tough. "You're affecting neighborhood harmony. This whole setup is disruptive to the community aesthetic." I laughed. I couldn't help it. My warehouse is a metal-sided structure set back on my own land, purchased a year ago for the express purpose of running a side hustle in peace. I'm not even zoned residential. I'm technically agricultural commercial hybrid, meaning I could legally raise pigs next to a forklift and no one could say squat. By now I'd had enough. I snapped a picture of their faces, their fake-looking badges, and the car they rolled in on. A dented SUV with a magnet slapped on the side reading HOA Enforcement Unit. I could see a crumpled fast food wrapper wedged under the wiper. I told them to leave or I'd call the sheriff. That got their attention. They left grumbling, still scribbling on that clipboard as they drove off like they'd done something noble. At sunrise, the real show began. I hadn't even finished my coffee before I saw her, Karen herself, marching up my drive in her iconic red blazer, heels sinking into the gravel, holding a stack of papers like they were the Constitution. Her face was already contorted into a performance-worthy scowl. She wasted no time. "I'm going to need you to read and sign these," she said, slapping the documents onto the hood of my truck. "These are the violations your structure has caused, and we're requiring an immediate remediation plan." I took one look at the top form and chuckled. Violation 1. Exterior reflectivity exceeds HOA standards. I looked at her. "Karen, my building is gray." "Exactly," she said. "But it's a shiny gray under afternoon light. It causes visual discomfort for residents in units 15 through 21. That's a hazard." I had to take a breath to stop from laughing in her face. "Karen, you know I'm not part of your HO. We've been through this. You're not even legally allowed to set foot on my land to begin with." She didn't flinch. "Well, the HOA charter grants us extended oversight of nearby non-compliant properties. It's called community adjacency management." "That's not a real thing," I said. She held up a laminated copy of her HOA guidelines, something I swear she made at Staples the night before. "Says right here, Section 12-3, aesthetically disruptive lots bordering an HOA perimeter may be subject to visual integration measures." She said it like it was gospel. "Karen, that's not legally binding," I said. "It's barely English." She huffed, red blotches rising on her neck. "I don't need a lecture from someone who built a glorified barn without proper community approval. You're bringing down property values. My sister-in-law wanted to buy in here, but when she saw that," she pointed at the warehouse, "she said it made the place look like a junkyard." I leaned against my truck, sipping my coffee, fully entertained. Tell your sister-in-law I offer competitive rent rates if she wants to open a welding school. That did it. She screamed something about calling the county. I told her to go right ahead. Then I called the sheriff. When he showed up 40 minutes later, I played him the footage from the night before. He stood there, squinting at the screen, arms crossed. These two say they're HOA enforcement, he asked. Yep. He laughed hard. That's not even a real badge. I could make one with a laminator and a trip to Office Max. I tried to interrupt her, blabbering about homeowner rights and aesthetic violations, but the sheriff cut her off. Karen, this ain't your jurisdiction. Never has been. And if I get one more call about your people stepping foot on this man's land without permission, I'll press trespassing charges myself. She stared at him like he'd spoken in Latin. Then she turned and marched off, muttering something about, "Not done yet." I had a feeling she meant it. The sheriff turned to me and grinned. "You want me to file a report, or you want to handle this your own way?" I gave it a second. "Give me a week. Let's have some fun." And that right there was the spark. Because if Karen wanted to play pretend games with HOA rules and fake security teams, then I'd play too, but I'd play for real. Because unlike Karen, I had actual deeds, legal rights, and one thing she clearly lacked: brains. The morning after Karen's failed inspection left my driveway echoing with her indignation and the sheriff's laughter, I figured things might die down. But I had underestimated her ability to double down on delusion. Around noon, a stack of papers showed up in my mailbox, all stuffed inside a cheap plastic binder with a red tab labeled Urgent HOA Action. I opened it, half expecting glitter or a cease and desist. What I got instead was even funnier: a formal HOA citation packet listing supposed violations committed by my property against the Community Visual Integrity Agreement. I sat at my workbench flipping through each page like I was reading a bizarre novel. Offenses included unregulated foliage patterns, color incongruity with HOA palette, and my personal favorite, building dimensions exceeding neighborhood visual comfort index. That last one had a footnote that read, "Warehouse causes psychological discomfort when viewed from street." I framed the most ridiculous page and nailed it to the warehouse wall. Underneath it I scrawled in marker, "Presented without jurisdiction." Then I grabbed my coffee and called my attorney Jeff, who had helped me through the property purchase last year and had a great sense of humor, especially when it came to overreaching HOA types. After I explained the situation, he laughed so hard he actually snorted. "Let me guess," he said. "They think your property magically joined the HOA through osmosis?" I told him they were trying to cite me under imaginary bylaws. He agreed to draft a formal letter stating in clear legal terms that my land was not, had never been, and could not be part of the HOA's territory due to the original subdivision plat and deed restrictions. While Jeff got to work, I decided to push back in my own way. I pulled out the certified property map, scanned it, and had a 3-foot-tall color version printed and mounted on a wooden sign. The sign read, "Private land, not in your HOA. Trespassers will be prosecuted." I bolted it right at the edge of my gravel drive, just far enough in that it was legally on my land, but close enough for Karen to see every time she passed by. I even laminated the deed map and tacked it below the main message, complete with a little arrow pointing to my lot and a handwritten caption, "Still a free country." Not even a day later, she came stomping up the drive again, this time with a different tactic. Concerned citizen mode. She tried a softer tone, laced with a fake smile that cracked under the weight of her clenched jaw. "We really should work together on this. There's no need for antagonism," she said, gesturing vaguely at my warehouse like it was a crime scene. "All we want is harmony in the neighborhood. Cooperation. Aesthetics matter." I nodded and sipped my drink. "I agree. That's why I've decided to plant a few trees. Ever heard of crimson bottlebrush shrubs? Real bright. They'll go great with the galvanized siding." Her smile twitched. "That's not exactly within our preferred palette," she began. I interrupted her, polite but direct. "Karen, this isn't your sandbox. My property isn't governed by your HOA. The sheriff already told you that. And soon, so will a certified letter from my attorney. She stiffened, then pulled out a folded paper from her purse. According to our board, your property borders a residential influence zone, which gives us extended oversight under the Supplemental Visual Impact Clause. I took the paper and looked at it. It was a badly photocopied page with several sentences clearly redacted with black Sharpie, as if that would make it more legitimate. I smiled, handed it back and said, "If you can show me a legally binding clause that overrides zoning laws and property deeds, I'll turn this place into a tea garden tomorrow." She left in a storm of gravel and empty threats. But it didn't stop there. 2 days later, a new set of inspectors showed up. Same black polos, same fake badges, but this time with a clipboard covered in neon post-it notes and a tiny decibel meter. They claimed to be conducting a sound compliance review and asked if I could turn on all my warehouse equipment for testing. I told them sure, and flipped on a nearby Bluetooth speaker, blasting polka music just to see their reaction. They winced, took a few fake measurements, then retreated to their SUV while pretending to type on an invisible tablet. I waved them off like I was sending tourists home from a roadside attraction. At that point, I realized I needed more than just warning signs and sarcasm. I started uploading footage of each interaction, Karen's clipboard rants, the inspections, the fake documents, to a private drive and backed them up on a hard disk. He didn't name Karen, but he didn't have to. I offered to walk him around the property, showed him the warehouse permits, my drainage system, and the approved plans from the county from when I installed the equipment pad and solar panels. Everything was clean, inspected, and fully legal. "Honestly," he said, "I don't know why I was even sent here. You're well within code. Sorry for the trouble." I told him not to worry. He was just doing his job. But the fact that Karen had resorted to reporting me to the county meant she was getting desperate. And that's when I decided to turn her desperation into public entertainment. That night, I uploaded a video compilation titled, "Ho Karen Tries to Seize My Warehouse, Fails Every Time." I spliced in footage from my security cameras, screen recordings of her fake citations, the phony patrols, and even a voiceover where I read her made-up violation list in my best dramatic narrator voice. Within 2 days, the video had 500,000 views. Comments rolled in from all over. Some were HOA horror stories of their own, others just fans of the chaos. But what mattered most was that it spread like wildfire in our local community. People started asking questions. Karen's own HOA members began to email me, some anonymously, others openly, thanking me for finally standing up to her. Then came the email that made my week. A local reporter from a small but popular news blog reached out, saying they'd been forwarded my video and wanted to know if I'd be open to an interview. I said yes before I even finished reading the sentence. The next afternoon, a crew of 2 showed up, took drone footage of my property, and interviewed me standing next to the massive, "Not in your HO" sign. I gave them everything: maps, citations, video, the leaked memo, and even footage of Karen trying to argue that metal siding gave her migraines. By the end of the week, the article was up. The headline read, "Local Man's Warehouse Sparks HOA Showdown. Not in your neighborhood, Karen." Karen's response was pure rage. She filed a complaint with the blog, claiming defamation, privacy invasion, and harassment. The blog's editor responded with a statement saying every piece of footage used was taken from public view or submitted with permission. The comments section turned into a battleground. Predictably, Karen's allies dwindled. Even the most rule-happy residents were now beginning to feel like she was turning their HOA into her own little kingdom. Still, Karen wasn't done. She pivoted to damage control. She began making emotional Facebook posts on the neighborhood page, filled with phrases like restoring community values, combating misinformation, and protecting neighborhood peace. In one particularly delusional post, she claimed the warehouse was built as a statement against shared community values, and urged members to vote for a resolution that would grant the board emergency powers to address disruptive properties. That post backfired spectacularly. Dozens of comments flooded in, ranging from mockery to outright rebellion. One user posted a meme of my warehouse wearing sunglasses with the caption, too legal to care. What Karen hadn't anticipated was the internal fracture she was causing. A quiet rebellion had begun to stir among the residents. Some started attending board meetings, not to support her but to question her actions. One of them, a retired real estate agent, demanded to see the HOA's budget allocations and expense reports. That triggered a series of discoveries about how Karen had been using HOA funds for things like personal landscaping, catered lunches for board retreats, and a so-called community beautification project that somehow paid for brand new patio furniture on her deck. Meanwhile, I stayed quiet and strategic. I started prepping for what I called the final push. I scheduled a town hall-style open meeting on my land, invited the press, residents, and even the sheriff, who was more than happy to attend and speak about property rights. I had my lawyer print out legal packets that included the deed, zoning ordinances, and photos of Karen's fake patrols. And to really drive the point home, I set up a projection screen and ran a loop of all the video evidence for attendees to see. Karen, of course, tried to crash the event. She showed up 15 minutes in, wearing her red blazer like a badge of honor and dragging a wheeled cart full of binders. She marched up to the mic, demanding to present the HOA's perspective. The crowd was not in her favor. Someone shouted, "You're not even on his land." Another yelled, "We saw the video, Karen. Go home." Her speech dissolved into shrieking claims of being victimized and threats of legal action against the entire event. That's when the sheriff calmly walked up, took the mic and said, "Ma'am, this is not your jurisdiction. You've been warned once. Don't make me warn you again." That was the moment her image shattered for good. By the time the sun set that night, I knew the war was no longer just mine. Karen had picked a fight with someone outside her reach and accidentally woke up an entire community that was tired of her nonsense. I wasn't just some guy with a warehouse anymore. I was the guy who held the line. And now I had a neighborhood ready to stand behind me. Karen's empire was beginning to crack, and I was about to break it wide open. It started with whispers, quiet conversations in driveways, muttered complaints on front porches, and neighbors leaning a little closer during morning dog walks. The tide had shifted. People who once stayed silent out of convenience or fear were now exchanging stories about Karen, laughing at her failed power moves, and realizing they weren't alone in their frustration. I didn't need to push anymore. Karen had built her own collapse, brick by brick, and now it was just a matter of watching the whole thing fall. But that didn't mean I was finished. No, I still had one final card to play, and it was going to hit harder than any viral video or laminated map. 1 week after the town hall, the HOA called an emergency board meeting. This time, it wasn't to scold me for aesthetic infractions or babble about visual harmony. It was about Karen. Newer board members with a conscience had called for a vote to suspend her authority as HOA president, pending an investigation into financial misconduct. The accusations weren't vague anymore. A group of residents had compiled receipts and records showing how HOA dues had been used to fund things that had nothing to do with the neighborhood. Custom furniture deliveries to Karen's house, a wellness retreat she took in Palm Springs labeled as an HOA conference, and even a private security subscription that matched the names of the fake inspectors she'd sent to my warehouse. All of it was documented, organized, and ready to blow the lid off. I wasn't technically allowed in the meeting, but I didn't need to be. Residents were now openly sharing updates, and one of them even live-streamed the whole thing under the guise of recording it for the record. I watched it from the comfort of my office, popcorn in hand. The meeting room was packed, voices overlapping, tension thick in the air. Karen tried to maintain her usual superiority, but she was sweating. Her hair was frazzled, and her binder flipping was frantic. She denied every claim, called the report slanderous, and accused multiple members of conspiring against her. When someone read aloud the purchase of a $1,200 patio set charged to HOA Outreach Aesthetics, she had no explanation, just a shaky voice and a redirected argument about positive neighborhood optics. The vote wasn't even close. She was suspended by a wide margin. Her face, red with rage, seemed to crumple under the weight of her own ego. She stormed out mid-meeting, slamming the door behind her so hard the camera shook. That clip alone made it into a dozen memes online, and the comments were relentless. But it wasn't the internet that would undo her. It was what came next. Karen had always assumed she was untouchable because no one had ever truly challenged her. She mistook silence for obedience and apathy for loyalty. But the moment the HOA board removed her, real oversight began. The new acting president, a soft-spoken retired teacher named Martha, announced they would initiate a formal audit of HOA funds. Residents volunteered to help. They combed through every check, invoice, and reimbursement filed over the past 3 years. The findings were worse than anyone expected. There were payments made to shell companies, suspiciously high renovation bills that only applied to Karen's home, and repeated withdrawals listed as event funds for parties that never happened. What made it worse was that she'd been trying to increase HOA dues under the guise of neighborhood revitalization. One email uncovered from the HOA account archives showed her writing to a contractor. Add 15% to the quote and we'll settle it as consulting fees. I'll get the board to approve it. That email alone was enough to push the board to contact a lawyer. By this point, I didn't need to lift a finger. Karen's world was collapsing without me even stepping outside. But I still had one piece of unfinished business: the legal consequences of her trespassing and fake patrols. My lawyer, Jeff, had prepared a formal case against the fake HOA enforcement she sent onto my land. We had footage, witness statements, and now even the sheriff's report on their unauthorized visit. The county prosecutor's office took an interest when we mentioned the use of fabricated security credentials and impersonation of a code enforcement officer. It wasn't just a civil matter anymore, it was criminal. Badges and impersonation of enforcement officials. That's when things stopped being funny and started getting serious. Karen wasn't just an entitled busybody anymore. She was now under investigation for conspiracy, fraud, and impersonating a public official through hired contractors. When the sheriff came by to deliver the notice of investigation, he gave me a small grin and said, "She thought this was a game. Now it's in our hands." That same week, the HOA publicly posted their financial findings, detailing every misuse of funds and filing a civil suit to recoup the losses. Karen's name was now permanently attached to the HOA's mismanagement scandal. Even her closest allies had gone silent or turned against her. The real estate agent who once bragged about Karen running a tight ship now listed her house, quietly hoping to sever ties before the court proceedings began. But what truly made the final blow poetic was how I used the very warehouse she tried to shut down. I turned it into a public workspace and art studio, offering cheap rent to local creators, food vendors, and hobbyists who needed a place to work. We held weekend markets, live music nights, and family events right in the courtyard. I installed lights, picnic tables, and even set up a community mural wall. The neighborhood that Karen claimed I was bringing down was now coming to life, without her. Neighbors who never used to talk much stopped by just to chat. Families brought their kids. Artists painted murals inspired by the town's resilience. Someone even made a cartoon version of Karen riding a tiny toy tank labeled HOA enforcement, and it was impossible not to laugh. What she tried to control became the very thing that united people, by showing them what community looked like without a tyrant in charge. Then, in the quietest move of all, Karen sold her house. No fanfare, no announcement, just a moving truck at dawn and a for sale sign that flipped to pending within hours. Rumor had it she relocated out of state, claiming she needed a fresh start in a more appreciative community. But everyone knew the truth. She hadn't moved. She'd been pushed by her own lies, her greed, and the very neighbors she thought she could bully forever. When the truck pulled away, I walked to the edge of my property, coffee in hand, and looked toward the now empty house. A neighbor passed by and said, "Guess she finally got the message." I smiled and nodded. She did. And that message was loud, clear, and probably still echoing in her oversized ego. This wasn't her HO anymore, and it never had been. Weeks passed after Karen's quiet departure, but the ripple effect of her downfall was just beginning to reach the far edges of the community. Her name, once spoken with either reverence or dread, had now become something between a joke and a cautionary tale. The HOA was undergoing a full transformation under new leadership. And for the first time in years, people were genuinely participating in community decisions instead of being ordered around like children. You could feel it in the air. Less tension, fewer angry letters taped to mailboxes, more neighbors waving instead of scowling. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And it wasn't built on fear. Meanwhile, I wasn't just enjoying the peace. I was thriving in it. My warehouse, the same one Karen tried to treat like a visual toxin, had become a community magnet. Vendors, artists, mechanics, and small food startups all found a place within those steel walls. Every Friday we hosted a rotating event. Sometimes a night market, sometimes a local craft fair, sometimes just a good old-fashioned barbecue with live music. And the kicker? All of it was legal, licensed, and approved by the same county that once had to send an officer over to humor Karen's baseless complaint. What she called an eyesore had turned into a symbol of independence and creative freedom, right in the middle of the neighborhood she tried to gatekeep. The sign at the edge of my property still stood tall. Private land, not in your HOA. Someone had added a sticker to it that read, Karen Free Zone. The sheriff stopped by one evening, not on official business, just to grab a plate of ribs and listen to the live band playing near the courtyard. He pulled me aside and gave me an update I hadn't expected, but definitely enjoyed. Karen's legal troubles hadn't just fizzled out. The county had decided to move forward with the impersonation charges tied to the fake security team. One of the hired inspectors flipped when he realized he could face jail time and gave a full statement that implicated Karen directly. Emails, texts, and even a voice memo where she told him, "Just act like you're with code enforcement. They won't know the difference," were entered into the case. The sheriff grinned as he told me, "She might get off with fines, but she's going to be bleeding money for a long time." Then came the cherry on top. Karen filed a lawsuit against me. Not through the HOA. She had no authority left there, but personally. Her claim was simple and ridiculous. Defamation, emotional distress, and economic damages due to misleading public statements and unflattering portrayals. In other words, she didn't like how people laughed at her online. She cited my YouTube video, the memes, the interviews, and even the neighborhood mural of her in the toy tank. Her lawyer served me the papers like it was the final blow. I read through the stack of absurdity, shook my head, and handed it to Jeff. His response: "Let's bury her with facts." We countered with a full packet of evidence. Every trespass documented, every forged inspection recorded, every incident involving the sheriff and county inspectors logged with dates and timestamps. We also included financial reports from the HOA audit, proving she'd misused member dues for personal benefit. Then we topped it off with public records showing my property had never been under HOA jurisdiction. Not once, not even close. The court date came faster than I expected. Karen showed up in a beige suit that looked like it had been ironed in a hurry, flanked by a nervous-looking attorney who already knew the case was a joke. The judge listened politely as her side rambled about harassment and public shaming, flipping through printed screenshots of YouTube thumbnails and Reddit threads. Then it was our turn. Jeff presented everything like a courtroom drama, building from the land deed to the HOA memo to the trespassing videos and the arrest reports tied to the fake patrol team. The judge didn't even let Karen's lawyer finish a rebuttal. She dismissed the case in under 10 minutes, citing it as meritless and ordering Karen to pay my legal fees. That one hit her harder than anything else. As she left the courtroom red-faced and furious, I gave her a polite nod. She didn't look back. After that, things went quiet. Karen disappeared completely from our radar. The house she sold sat empty for a while before being bought by a young couple who turned it into a cozy little fixer-upper. They came by my place once to ask about the warehouse events and ended up volunteering to help set up tents for the next food market. They brought cookies, real ones, not subpoenas. The kind of neighbors you actually want. The HOA, now under Martha's calm and reasonable leadership, had become a model of sanity. They focused on useful things: sidewalk repairs, community safety, budget transparency. Imagine that. As for me, I was finally able to relax. The fight had ended, not with a bang, but with a series of small wins stacked so high they became impossible to ignore. I was just some guy with a metal building and a stubborn streak. But Karen had tried to bulldoze through with fake rules and plastic authority, and it all came back on her like a freight train. What she never understood was that people will put up with a lot, until someone shows them they don't have to. That's what changed everything. It wasn't me tearing her down. It was her being exposed for what she truly was, and everyone else choosing not to follow her anymore. On the 1-year anniversary of the infamous inspection, I held a celebration. We called it Freedom Fest. The band played on a stage built from pallets, food trucks lined the lot, and someone even brought fireworks. In the middle of it all, under the warehouse lights, we unveiled a new addition to the mural wall. A life-sized painting of Inspector Buttercup, a local goat that had become something of a mascot. Right next to him, someone had drawn a cartoon Karen running from a swarm of HOA violation notices blowing in the wind. It was funny. It was earned. And it was ours. As the music played and people danced in the gravel lot, I took a walk to the edge of my land and looked out over the quiet, the peace, the absurd journey it took to get here. Karen had tried to control, dominate, and reshape a place that wasn't hers. All it took to stop her was a little daylight, a few good neighbors, and the truth. The warehouse still stood, stronger than ever. Not just as a building, but as proof that you don't need permission to live on your own terms. And sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's just still being here, doing fine long after the noise is gone.